I guess
Okay,
we can. Let's start with the chapter first.
okay. Uh, okay. So this week we're talking about gender, sexuality, and equality.
Hmm.
Off rip, a quote that stood out to me that I wrote down. What is read to children not only leaves an impression behind, but also influences the values and shapes the dreams of children. It can provide negative images and stereotypes and cut off hopes and limit aspirations. It can erode self respect through overt and covert racism or sexism. And then I highlighted it can also help young people get beyond family troubles, neighborhood violence, stereotyping, and prejudice.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, off rip, I felt like that was a really strong opening.
It really was.
Um, I feel like maybe you don't think about how much the media that one consumes, especially books, can affect how young people view themselves and view them their future selves. So I feel like off rip, that's what that made me think about.
Well, and how others view too, because a lot of times, just like with our some of the classes that other classes I'm taking, one of the lessons was talking about the perceptions of disabilities. Well, I mean, most people's perceptions of everything, as far as gender and sexuality and everything, if the media would just leave it as it's accepted, it's normal, and it was included in everything, then it would be no big deal. Nobody would
Right.
even flinch about it.
Right. Um, they also said there are inequities in children's trade books that have very few good role models for girls and that
Mm.
sometimes perpetuate gender stereotypes. So automatically, like they're talking about the books that most of us got read to us as a child, like from
Mm-hmm.
fairy tales, just regular little books that all kids read. And I mean, you probably don't really think about how they're perpetuating the stereotypes, like girls are going to be in the kitchen helping
Yep.
mom,
Yeah.
cooking, cleaning. They need someone to come save them.
Yes, they're helpless. They need a hero, and the male is
Mhm.
always the hero. And
Right.
um,
Yes. Yes.
I
They're
know there was.
always the damsel in distress, needing
Mhm.
the one of the things that the book said was they're either needing harm or causing harm. And the causing harm, I never really thought of the needing, not needing harm, needing assistance or causing harm. I thought that was really important because I was like, oh, wow, we don't really think about, we see the damsel in distress, but we don't always see or talk about uh, them as causing harm or causing a problem to happen so that something can be fixed.
Yes.
Right. I agree.
Um,
That was an interesting point.
and I know
Mm,
this jumps all over, but another thing that about the children's literature is you don't think about, but it doesn't portray it, up until recently or in the past several years,
Mhm.
there was a mom, there was dad, the nuclear family was depicted in everything. And that's not most people's reality.
right.
I mean, honestly, the nuclear family is the least common. I mean, I know y'all see it too, that you're going to come across.
Hmm.
Um, and so,
Right.
but that hasn't been represented much in children's literature. So I mean, how would you not feel a little excluded and wondering where you fit? Because if there were no stories or movies with your kind of life.
It's kind of funny that you said that because I never really thought about the fact that, I mean, realistically, a lot of people come from single parent households.
Yes.
So I feel like that might be one of the main dynamics of a family. And like very underrepresented, especially in books. I don't know if I've ever read a book, like a child book, that had just like a single mom or a single dad.
I can't think of the title
Acceptable
of it,
as
but there was one that oh, I can't remember what it was. I wish I could. I'm sorry. I should have already looked that up. But it was represented. Actually, it was an African American single mom, and she was a
Mhm.
very strong mom, and it portrayed her as a very strong character. I'll have to end up looking that up because it was a really really good book. It was very well written, and it was one of those things that you're like, good. Yay, there's something
Right.
that represents something other than, oh, we have the happy mom, the happy dad, and we're all just the perfect, like you said, fairy tales.
Yeah.
Right.
Fairy tales.
Definitely.
Let's see. Um, Okay, so gender roles portrayed in children's literature. There are fewer books that have girls as the main characters than books that have boys as the protagonist.
Mhm.
And when I read that quote, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty true.
Hmm.
Um, even today,
Oh, yeah.
um, I know the book they pointed out Disney, and how most of the fairy tales and things that like we grew up reading, it did come from Disney. And I know Disney is just now trying to start to change like those
Um,
stereotypes.
I think one of their big ones that had a lot of people change their opinion and move towards being more accepting because let's see, I have my sister-in-law does not like for her children or did not like for them to watch the classic Disney movies until is it Merida where
Mhm.
she is just the strong and she shoots a bow and arrow. I think it was Merida. Yes, when they came out with that movie, she changed her tone and that became one of their favorites of all time because she was the hero
Right.
Yeah,
essentially.
because if you look, I mean, you've got Ariel, Belle, basically Cinderella, Snow White. They all
Aurora.
have lost yes, they've all lost parents, especially that mother figure.
Oh, yeah.
So, not only are they kind of a damsel in distress, but they're an orphan
Mhm.
damsel in distress.
Mhm.
That's funny. I didn't really think about that. I guess they all were like orphans in a sense, a lot of them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, Cinderella, I mean, she did have the stepmom, but like her mom had died, her dad had died, so she was left alone with this, evil stepmother. But that's what I just kept hearing when I was reading this stuff, especially about the lack of books with girl characters, and that even goes on in middle school. I know when I take my kids to the library, and the boys find books about cars
Oh,
and trucks and
Mhm.
racing and all kinds of stuff, and the girls are just kind of like, wow, it's either or. We either
mhm.
have this book, or there's not a lot, for them to choose from.
Or a lot of
Right.
times the female character is not portrayed in a positive light. Not only is she the
No,
damsel in stress, but she's not very intelligent. She doesn't
and
work really
Mhm.
hard and she's helpless and waiting, she's just waiting for everything else, but she just not very intelligent. Like think about,
it,
I mean, I know it's not great, but a great thing to bring up, but I mean, because it's a nuclear family, but like Junie B. Jones, she's a hot mess. I mean, when you look at like first graders, she's inappropriate, she's a behavior problem, but she's not, an intelligent, hardworking girl. And there aren't many that are like that have
no.
that to offer.
Is Judy B. Jones like Gilly? Did you ever read Gilly? Gilly's like that. She is a foster child, but when you read it, I mean, she has terrible language. She does a lot of bad stuff, and it is sort of funny in a way. But if you're sort of looking for a little bit more serious character, it's really hard. God, when I
Oh,
did
she's
that
not
book with the
serious.
middle school, yeah, I was
She's
like,
just
oh, Gilly
grammatically inappropriate
is.
and always doing stuff like pulling her dress over her head and just goofy
Yeah,
stuff.
it's just
I don't like
goofy
it.
stuff that would be probably fine for a minor character, but the main character you want to be a little bit more polished and maybe a little bit more interesting, not so, you
But I
know.
mean, but each of them do serve a place because there are people who need to read and need to see themselves represented in
Yes,
literature. Just like,
yes.
there are people that, and we were talking about the parents and single parent and two dads, two moms. There are people that live with their grandparents. There are people that are
I've
being
got a
raised by
lot of
great
kids.
grandparents. I
Yes.
mean, like there's probably more people. We probably have more kids at school that are being raised by a grandparent or a great grandparent than there are that have a two parent home.
Yeah. When I first started teaching, I knew, but I was really shocked in just my small classes how many kids were being raised by grandparents, not young grandparents, but grandparents in their 80s. And
Yeah.
that's, it's just rough. Let's just, be honest. It's really rough to have a teenager at any age, but to be 80 and in your mid 80s and trying to raise a teenager, oh my Lord.
Right.
Oh, well, I think it talks about too, sorry if I take this to about the sexuality portrayed in children's books. In that portion, it talked about the sixth, seventh, and eighth graders and their struggles with raging hormones and their feelings of
Yeah.
inadequacy, and how, literature can sometimes be the main thing that they connect with to make them feel like they just are not out there in left field, basically, and alone, and that it's not that they're not just left out, and that they're wondering if they're, let's see, I think it said that they wonder if they're pretty enough, or they're handsome enough, or they struggle with relationships, or they have heartbreak. And a lot of times literature can offer them something to relate to. And
Yeah, exactly. It gives them
really
sort of
is.
a place to go. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I wrote a quote about that as well, in the sexuality portrayed in children's book area. I said, often preteens and teens find themselves alone, vulnerable, and fearful of confiding in family or friends about such emotions because going through this time period can be a very lonely experience as children begin to identify with peers of the same sex or opposite sex. And so then they also wrote examine school curriculum and incorporate literature that includes the concept of healthy relationships, both heterosexual and homosexual. And I was like, okay, wow, like I'm glad they added that because I mean, during that time period, most kids do feel very alone, and most kids are not comfortable talking to their parents, even their siblings, peers. Like, they're so, I don't know,
And
they have the mindset,
nobody
like,
knows if they
what
have
is
a
it,
model of a healthy relationship. So
right?
literature can provide them
Right.
that
Right.
model, like it said, like you just read, that to know that, oh wait, this is what you should be. You're not going to be slapping each other in the face, or
Right,
you're not going to be ignoring each other. Or maybe you don't yell, or you yell all the time. Maybe you do have conversations with each other.
right. And then even the fact that they said examine the curriculum because, it can be some books can be deemed as problematic or some parents may not feel comfortable with certain things. So examine the curriculum and see
Mhm.
what's appropriate, see what you can incorporate,
Right.
and
Right.
provide something for them that can be that healthy example.
I think it said in there that it was very important to important for the literature to have a subtle approach in addressing these topics, so as to not confuse young impressionable. And I thought that was a really bold statement, and I thought that was pretty important too.
I did too. It's not like you don't want to hit them over the head with it, but you just sort of want to be like, it can be introduced, especially if you're
Yeah.
maybe, if you're maybe alone, maybe a character that's got, some lonely feelings, but then and again, they are very social and kind of learn how to navigate the world when maybe they're a little bit shyer, but they can see how to, navigate a world where they can find friends or can be in the world.
That they belong, they are
That they
accepted there.
belong, right? Exactly.
That kind of brings me back to what they were saying about how like little kids are just so impressioned by what they read and it's teaching them like this is how you're supposed to be that like and even if it isn't or maybe it is intentional. I think I just never thought about how, like, it's so in your face, like, when you're reading and consuming these things, it is kinda telling you, like, "Okay, this is what this is supposed to look like. When you grow up, this is what you're supposed to do.
Mhm.
This is how you're supposed to feel in this situation." Especially reading because it gives so much detail,
Mhm.
into,
Yes.
like, the thoughts of a person versus watching TV or a movie or something.
And I thought about that too. And it seemed to me that it's like it tells you how you're supposed to act, or how you're supposed to be and feel. And once you're out of that age, then you're not supposed to feel that anymore. Like as an early adult, you're not supposed to feel alone or you're not supposed to feel inadequate. That's only for teenagers.
Right.
So I remember
Because
like,
most of the books they're most of them are picture books, aren't they?
yes, yes,
They are. But then too, you have, let's see, you made me think about when you were talking about that it tells you what to do, and you just really don't think about for sure if it's intentional or kind of implied. One of the things, because I worked in first grade last year, and so at the beginning of the year, all you do, first couple of weeks, just like I'm sure you guys do, you teach rules and procedures.
yes.
And it's like we read, and everything is based with a book and literature. One of them is my mouth is a volcano. Your tummy is rumbling and you feel it coming, and the next thing you know, it just explodes and it erupts and it all comes out of your mouth. All these words come out of your mouth like the lava in a volcano, and you've got
Oh
to
my
try to
goodness.
hold your words, and it teaches them strategies to hold their words so they're not constantly interrupting them.
Yes. I think I'm going to read that book with my 10th graders because they still just have this issue of everything that's in their head must now come out of their mouth.
But you know what? Even big kids do. I mean, when you make a fun class project out of it, they do all like literature. That
Right.
front, even if it is a younger, a
Yeah.
book from a much younger age group, they do still like them.
Yeah, they
enjoy.
do. They love being able to talk and kind of do their own or inject their own stories because everybody's got something to say at some point.
And
Right.
I'm going to spin off of that for just a minute. And Lauren, you can tell me to stop. But some of that, I almost feel like okay, so getting into the book George, some of it, I almost feel like some of the vocabulary, even though teaching them vocabulary is wonderful and great, I almost feel like some of it is a little challenging because I started looking up some of the vocabulary and thinking about some of the words and the list of things that I would need to pre-teach is vast.
Yeah,
And almost, but when the vocabulary is that high, not that it's bad, because that's a great thing, but they often will lose focus of the comprehension and understanding of the story. And that story is so I feel like it's just one of those things that it is important in their lesson to just see that they could place themselves in it. But then again, it's not so much vocabulary. So I was torn between that a little bit of
it
some of
was
the
very
vocabulary
vocabulary
being,
heavy. Yeah.
and I was would it be? Because I started thinking through how I would make a lesson plan based off of it. And I was thinking of through all of the words, and just in the first 5 chapters, there were like 20 something words. And I think, let's see, research says that it's about 8 to 10 words per week that they can retain.
Yeah.
For new vocabulary. So I just thought was kind of like, oh, wait a minute, that wouldn't, but then again, you could draw it out. Or you might have a class that wouldn't be an issue, but there are context clues depending on how the class handled context clues and their ability to infer and imply that, come up with that meaning. Anyway, sorry. I overthink everything.
I agree. That made me think of like, okay, so what age group do you all feel that this book would be appropriate to teach with?
On mine, it says 4th grade and up. And it says the interest level age is 8 to 12. But I mean, depending, but also, I mean, in my demographic area, I'm sped. So I do the inclusive classes, and it would be one of those things that I would need to look at a different, even for middle school age, we would just need to look at something and and it would be a lot of vocabulary instruction.
Because it was so vocabulary heavy, like, or new vocabulary heavy. Does that make sense? I agree.
Yeah. I was thinking too, and when I saw that 8 to 12, I was like, I might do the upper part of that 11 to 12.
Yeah.
You know, it's been a long time since I've worked with younger kids, but something about 4th grade, the last time I was with 4th graders, I'm like, this might really go really over their head as far as just the story. Like, they would be able to understand that, but I think maybe some of the ins and outs might be a little tricky. So, but yeah, I would probably do the higher end.
You just made a good point, though, that they would probably grasp the concept of the story, but they might get lost in some of the details, which would be fine, because then it would just be a subtle, like the chapter said, making it a subtle introduction, and keeping it to the point where you're not. It's just energy subtly introduced. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. I was gonna say, because I think my kids would definitely, they would grasp the concept. They would understand the story, but I know we would have to have like a lot of stop and have a conversation moment.
Yes, definitely.
But then again, also at the end of some of the chapters, it does leave it open that it's a great place to work on predicting skills.
Right.
Where you could let them, have a group discussion or pair and share of what they might want to predict that they could happen, and then let's investigate. Now let's see what happens next.
Right.
Sorry, can you tell I've been sitting in trainings all week?
No,
I was like, what organizers would we use? Let's talk about the trade.
I'm getting you ready. Yeah, no, I'm so glad. Like, my kids, they love to predict stuff, and I do it all the time. That's a great thing. And, I always emphasize, it's not whether you're right or wrong. I mean, you can predict they'll get in a rocket and fly to the moon. I mean, it's just, based on what we've learned so far, either chapter 2 or 3.
On prior knowledge.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes, especially if they get it right, like if they predicted what was going to happen, that's a really good booster for them because they're understanding up to now.
And I think it's also a good like those inferences that can also motivate them to do some writing. Like, I'm always trying to get some thoughts out of their head, so I think it's a strong enough read to get some good thoughts.
Well, I looked up some things because I'm gonna Google and see if my thought processes match what other things do, and looked up some things about some questions that teachers were using for this stuff. And it was talking about, write a summary of what is the main conflict in the first chapter, or describe an average school day for George and why is it challenging, or tell
Oh,
us
that's really
it's
good.
a school day is challenging for George. And I thought that would be really good for students to be able to do, because of the detailing they would have to do, and they would kind of have to sequence that too.
Yes,
It would bring in a
Right.
lot of good strategies for them.
I'm
I
like,
think so.
Oh, and I saw something else that was talking about, think about Kelly and her dad and their apartment,
all
and
right.
infer what can you infer about Kelly and her dad. Kelly's dad is probably a musician.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, it says he's a musician. I'm sorry, it says he's a musician. Single dad.
George had to infer that, the mom, I think she said she knew the mom passed away, or did she infer? She inferred that the picture on the wall was her mom. I know that.
Yes.
Yes, because when
She
he
said
goes
she
there, he
didn't talk
does see
about her
that.
much.
Is the picture, and he said that it's a picture that nobody really talks about.
Yeah,
But she could infer, like, okay, that's Kelly's mom.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get too into the book,
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to jump there, but it was a great thing to I was like, oh wait,
the
no, it was a great
conversation.
segue.
I'm sorry. Sometimes I am a squirrel, because if I don't say it, I'll try to write it down, but then I'll forget
No,
what I was going to say.
I do.
I'll
And I was like,
definitely
oh man,
forget.
I think I had a good point, but I forgot.
Mm-hmm. Because honestly, this chapter in the text, I mean, they made a lot of good detailed points, but I feel like they were saying a lot of the same things.
Yes. Okay. I felt that way too, but I was
So,
going, okay, maybe, but I like the way the textbook has like a discussion with us,
mhm,
but most of it was basically the same. I felt like it was basically a lot of the same, like you said,
mhm. And I mean,
in
even
a
in my
different
notes,
way.
because I broke it down like in my notes, and from each section, I wrote like, okay, this stuck out to me, this stuck out to me. But I mean, basically, they were saying, young kids are influenced by what they read, and they perpetuate these stereotypes, which we did discuss.
Mhm.
I just wanted
Represent everybody.
right.
I did like the part where it said thoughts to consider when choosing appropriate literature, but it talks about choose that characters that are portrayed with distinctive personalities regardless of their gender.
Mhm,
Book literature that the achievements of the characters are not based on gender.
right.
Traits such as strength, compassion, courage, and initiative are treated as human and not gender specific.
Right.
Occupations, clothing, involvement in physical activities or sports are represented equally and not or gender free. So I thought those were some good points to think about, and I think it's one of those things that sometimes we don't think about, because
Right.
those I
Exactly.
just
We don't really
some of those I'm
consider.
like, oh, I never really thought about that. And if
Right.
there's somebody that in sitting in your classroom that might be a sensitive subject area for them,
Right.
they might feel uncomfortable, and I would never want to purposely make somebody feel unwelcome or uncomfortable,
Mhm.
And I was like,
I
oh,
think
deep thought moments.
Yeah, no, that was a really good list because I don't think about that when I was choosing books or when I was trying
mhm,
to, find something that my kids to read. I was like, gosh, even though this is great, I never even considered it, not even one time.
right,
So going forward, it'll be a good list to
right.
kind of go back through and be like, oh, are the characters equal like in their abilities, or is it just the boys or the males who are getting all the attention with achievement and ability and things like that? Are they really the heroes in the end? When the girls are just kind of there being a good support system.
Some of those notes that I wrote too, create a library collection that balances both male and females in a variety of roles. So I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, that's important. Classrooms, homes, and libraries needs collections to include a wide range of topics with a combination of male and female characters, portraying a variety of occupations, sports achievements, emotions, family dynamics. And I know that's what you were just saying. Um, and then I said, it's important to remember that when adults choose books for children, this stood out to me because it's like, in a way, it's almost like censoring. They need to discuss these books with them, and they need to be aware that children see books as reflecting how the world really is and should be. And it's like, as the person who's picking the books for them, like, you're ultimately deciding, okay, this is what you're going to consume and this is how you're going to see the world. So it's important to like have those conversations with the kids too. Like, hey, this is what we're about to read about. What do you think? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Just give them kind of a preview of what's about to happen.
Right.
Oh, and earlier when we were talking about the picture books and serving, and I'm sorry, I was scrolling through. I pulled up my notes because I just was having a moment where my brain was not connecting the dots. But I'm sorry. But it was talking about to be important. It is because those books do serve as visual aids, like a role model for
Mhm.
for our students and for our younger students. And it's important to choose books that enable children to see themselves as strong, hardworking, and
Mhm.
successful, not based on gender, but just that, like it mentioned in the other part, that's human. That's a human trait, not a gender-based trait.
Right.
Um, and but and being mindful not to include books that have the sex role stereotypes. And that it talks about that these books, because children do often feel so isolated and alone, these books can lessen their feelings, and it helps them just feel more comfortable. It helps them feel more comfortable and able to seek help or talk to somebody if they feel more accepted and more
Right.
included.
I think ultimately the purpose of the books are to validate their experiences and to
Mhm.
just let them know like these aspects of your life are normal. You're not the only person going through these things. Like
Yeah.
everybody is somebody somewhere is going through the same
Yes,
thing.
definitely.
Um, and I did find that, okay, so George or Melissa was published in 2015.
Mhm.
And it was 2020. The American Library Association there was a quote that I saw by them that it said it was 2020's most challenged book.
I saw that too.
Mhm.
I think
Um,
I read the date wrong. I thought it was the year that it came out. So it came out in 2015.
mhm.
And then several, or at least 5 years later, that's when it just kind of became like the most
I guess
challenged.
I never could find more detail on that because I kept trying to Google more because I was just curious. But
Yeah,
it said it was 2020's most challenged book, and I was like, oh, okay. So I don't know if it just took that long for it to get in circulation
maybe, or
or
maybe just
well,
kind
and
of
a lot of times when we look at how many of our books that we've talked about in other chapters that are banned books and how long they were in circulation before they became an issue.
right.
Right.
Some of them were decades, and then all of a sudden somebody decided, no, that's not a good one. We need to put that on the list.
Mhm. For sure.
But I feel like the book talked about it gave what would seem like it would be authentic situations that children would be able to relate to. So there, anyway.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
remember when, Heather Has Two Mommies came out, and oh gosh, wasn't it my dad's roommate or something like that? Oh, Heather Has Two Mommies was just, I mean, people were pulling it off the shelf and fighting over it. And I remember I found it, I found it in like a Books a Million or Borders or something like that. And it was, just a picture book, and it just showed them going to the park and going to the zoo and being at home and doing all those things that the typical family does. It's just she did it with two moms instead of a mom and a dad. But I just remember there being a lot of rage and anger, that book was even printed or published or distributed
yeah.
in any kind.
But it's interesting because I mean, even now I know on Disney Channel, I think they have a show that has like two moms or two dads or something. And the conversation actually came up in my classroom. The kids weren't there, but it was just adults in the classroom. And everybody's older than me, so they're just I'm just there, they're just talking. It was actually both of my parents, I don't know if anyone else is there, but anyway, they're talking about and it's funny too because I mean, typically the older a person is, like they're gonna have more problems with these things. So I think they were talking about the Disney show, like showing the same-sex parents, and they're like, I don't like that. They're just shoving that down their throats and yada yada yada, which that's most people's main argument.
It is,
But
yes.
I mean, realistically, that's people's reality. So I don't think it's more so shoving it down someone's throat. It's just depicting a different
Right.
form of reality. Like this is their
Yeah.
life. So
Like we were saying earlier, with a lot of our kids being raised by, grandparents or just
mhm.
even aunts and uncles. That is not a theory. I mean, between the three of us, we have all seen that happen. That is not something that we're guessing at. That's
Yeah.
not something that we're like, oh, maybe they are. We see that firsthand. So if there was a book to come out about that, that would be a true representation of the kids that we teach.
One of the books that I had ordered for one of my personal boys, it was, you know, it's probably an upper elementary book, but it's called Crenshaw. Have you ever read Crenshaw by Catherine Applegate? It's about a homeless child.
Okay.
It's about Jackson, his parents are working 2 and 3 part-time jobs trying to make ends meet. They get evicted from their apartment. They live in their van, and he changes schools all the time because they can never keep a house. And he has he creates this imaginary friend, and he has torn between understanding and knowing if Crenshaw is real or if he's imaginary, just because sometimes his visualization of him and his involvement with Crenshaw is just so real. He just is curious if
Oh
other
my
people
gosh.
see him. And it's really cool, though. I mean, not cool, but it's important. I mean, it is cool, but because it portrays what so many of our kids actually deal with. But this fits that. I mean, it may not be about sexuality, but it's about the diversity of, you know,
Right.
you have to give some stories that show that you do fit and it's okay. So for them to feel comfortable and talk to somebody about.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to get off.
Oh
No,
no, I
because that
mean,
kind of ties us back into the book because
Yes.
George, I mean, George felt like she did not fit in. I mean, there was several moments in the book where it showed that she just craved like community. I know I wrote a quote from when she was in the principal's office. As we know, she got into the fight with
Jeff.
Jeff. Thank you. Other characters, I never remember their names. Sorry.
I
yeah.
understand.
She got into the fight with Jeff, and it's funny because not funny, but ironic because it's her first time getting in trouble, and she's not even tuned into the conversation with, of basically getting fussed at. But she's like, okay, I see this rainbow flag in the
Oh
background,
yeah.
and I know I wrote down. I'll have to find it. I have a lot of notes, but I wrote down exactly what she saw on. There was a note underneath, and it basically
Say that this is a safe
Safe
space for you.
space.
yes,
Yeah, I
there was
think it
a
was
Yeah,
a
safe
just
safe
saying that
space
this is
one.
a safe space.
Mhm,
Basically that you are all are welcome here. This is a safe space for
right.
you.
And she was like, I wonder where that space is, and if there will be other girls there. Maybe we can talk about makeup. Maybe we can even try on makeup.
Mhm.
And it's just funny, like it's so important to her, even in the moment of like, you're really getting in trouble here for the first
Yeah,
time.
she's like, oh wow, this is a safe space. Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah,
I feel
I
like it
wrote
just, but I feel like that's like one of those hidden factors that shows you the need and how much we need literature. That
right?
I feel like that was a very hidden moment that just shows us how much we need literature that makes everybody feel included.
mhm.
And one of the things too, I mean, this is never mind. I'm not even going to go there. We were talking about this one day at school that we have tried to not call people like man or boy or girl. Just say hey guys, hey friends, and just things like that. Just because I don't want to unknowingly make anybody feel uncomfortable or unwelcome. And I know that sounds crazy, but and that
No,
we're not supposed to put our opinions in, and I don't know why I just came out of my mouth.
No,
Sorry.
that's fine.
but it's interesting because you're both from Georgia, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're all from the South. So it's like everyone's raised to yes ma'am, no ma'am, like
Mhm.
so it's interesting how in today's society you have to be very mindful of what you say because we were taught that's respectful, but now you don't want to step on any toes, you don't want to hurt any feelings, you don't want to
I
offend
don't want to hurt
anybody.
feelings. Mm-mm.
And it's again, it's interesting because like I mean, that's real life. There was a
Right.
non-binary teacher at my school this year, just like there's kids with two mommies. So, I
We
mean, it's
have
real
we had a
life.
student that mommy is transitioning to the daddy is transitioning to the mommy. They're not technically together anymore, but they still live together. And one of them has moved in a boyfriend. And but that's a lot for that child to take in. And it's one of those things that we tried everything we could to try to help her feel accepted and included. But she knows that she's different, and that just, it's kind of heartbreaking anyway.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be hard.
Because it's you want them to fit in, but we only have so many books that we can.
Right.
Superintendent would fire you on the spot if you use an unapproved book. So
Right.
It's interesting though, because a lot of parents don't want their kids exposed to certain things, but at the end of the day, like, whether your kid reads this book or watches this show, they're going to see it because it's real life. Like, their peers, it's amongst their peers' parents, their teachers. So it's like, and then that also just brings me back to how important it is as a teacher to, it may not always be possible, but just to be able to let the child know, like, you're accepted here, you're included here. And that's why I thought it was so cool that the principal did have that in her office, because I mean, even that was like a monumental thing for George. And then at the end, after the play, she said to George, like, my door is always open.
Yeah,
that
that was one of the things that I wrote down. I know I think the principal, from the way that I read it, the principal kind of picked up that the mom was like, oh gosh, and the principal was like, that's okay.
Miss Udell was very much not happy. I was kind of surprised that she wasn't more open and understanding. So that kind of caught me off guard a little bit, I'll be honest with you, just because
I know. I
she
think
has
it was
been
just
so
because
comforting
maybe
to him in the classroom that she was so angry with him in the performance.
I know, and it sounded to me like maybe it was just because it got changed. She didn't know if something had happened. Like, I think it was just everything. I think in that moment she was like, "Why did you do this?" And then she was like, "Okay."
See? But then, like, she was so against George. No, you
Oh,
can't
she
be
was
that girl
she was
and
adamant
neglect
about that.
George.
She was
It's
not
like,
even. She didn't even have a conversation with George about, like, maybe you can. She was like, "Well, you can either do Wilbur or Templeton." Like, there was just very.
she was so
She was very
wrong.
either
But
or.
don't you all wish you had a friend like Kelly?
Oh my gosh,
Oh
that's what I said.
gosh, yes.
That's what I said. That was the
Oh,
first thing I wrote down, was like, I want her as my friend now. I mean, she's always like, it's not a fake happiness, and I don't think her happiness comes from an insecurity. I think she is really that bubbly and gregarious, and she loves
Like,
life, and she wants people to
yeah.
be around
I feel
her.
like you can infer that Kelly has to be a strong person. She and her
Mhm.
dad is, they're on their own. She has an uncle that comes and takes her and does fun things, but she's very strong. She's very worldly. Like when she was talking about that, she doesn't wear her skirts to school because those boys look up her dress, and that isn't just
Yeah,
And
she
and
does.
I
I
like
thought
that
that
they put that in there too, though. Like,
I did
but
too.
that
That
was
was a
just
really good
worldly
part.
especially of a fourth grade little girl.
Yeah.
Sometimes they realize it, but sometimes they don't fully realize everything. So
that's
she's just
true.
very aware, and she's very conscious of so many things.
And I like the idea how the house was really messy, but her room was very neat and put together, very organized. And he was like, whoa, this is like very different from the outside, which dishes in the sink and stuff everywhere. But yeah, she just I had a lot of friends, like Kelly, and still do, kind of, in my life. And I was like, they're just great people to have around.
Right. It kind of shows that she's the structured one.
Yes.
And then something that was just a big touching moment for me was, okay, she did have to take her a little time after George told her, but she's like, hey, I did my research,
Yes.
you can do this. There's a surgery you can have that's or hormones. Are you
But
transgender?
at first you thought her time away was that was kind of confused or upset. Her time away was really that she was researching a way to help
Yes,
her
How can
friend.
I help my friend?
She
right.
needed
How
to
can
be
I
his
help
little
my friend?
mama, or
Right.
her little
Yes.
mama. And it's like, oh, that's why. So
Even the zoo, like, that was her idea.
That was
that was
all
her
hers.
idea.
Yes.
And that was so sweet that wouldn't have crossed my mind to do, like, hey, my uncle never met you before.
We're
So
gonna go to the zoo, right? We're gonna
Yeah.
brush you up and go to the zoo. I thought too, like, her giving up the part like that,
that was so big of her.
that was
Like,
because she wanted, it was like the coveted role. It was like the main
She
thing. And
worked hard for her part. I mean, even if
she
she was
did,
saying like George was a little better,
she took out that notebook of things that she had written down about it.
right?
So she was prepared, but it's like it meant more to her to let George do it than for her to get any kind of accolade. And I was like, wow, my gosh, this
Right.
Kelly is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And even the risk she took, because they knew they were probably going to get in a little bit of trouble.
Some
They're
kind
like,
of, yeah.
this is what we're gonna do. Which also brings me back to the teacher. I guess this is, as a reader, we have to infer what happened after with the teacher because they didn't address it. But I kind of wondered, okay, so how was that next day in class? Like, what did
Yeah,
she
did
say? I know
I
she
feel
had to
like
say something.
I feel like the tone was set when the principal talked about how proud she was and what a great job you did, kid, and things like that. That it set the tone that the principal wasn't going to allow Miss Udell to do anything.
But I know
Let it go.
initially it was like she came, the teacher, Mr. How do you say her name?
I say
I said I read it as Udell.
okay, I said
Udell.
Udell too, yeah.
Okay, so Mrs. Udell, I know she walked up to George and was like, and then the principal kind of checked it, like, no, we're not doing that.
Yes,
But
cut it off.
I mean, realistically,
I
it's
felt like
really
that was
just a
saying that
person,
she was
so-
saying nothing further. My safe space for you, safe place for you applies, and you are not going there.
So
I
do
feel
you
like
think we
she
can
just
infer then that, okay, after that, the teacher never addressed it, like she never said anything?
those were my thoughts.
Okay.
She stomped it
just-
before she
I
squat
really
that the
think
principals.
that-
Well, that was just in my dealings with administration. That would be my initial thought. And Brian, you can correct me too, because you've had many years of dealing with administration. That when they step in and do that,
Yeah,
you don't go further. You drop
no,
it.
you go home and scream out to an empty room, but you don't
Yeah,
like
but you
say
don't
anything.
pursue.
Yeah,
You don't pursue those any further. That means it's squashed. Move on.
that's it. Move on, find something else.
So back to mention Jeff a little bit. So the Some Jerk t-shirt.
Mhm.
And when they were doing the Charlotte's Web and Jeff was a jerk and beat him up and made him throw up. Made her throw up. Sorry, made George throw up. That just that
I
made
know,
me
and it said that they were friends the year before when they did the
Rick.
checkers.
They were okay. Rick
Oh,
and
that's right. Yeah,
Rick and
Jeff was one that moved
Rick
me
and
in.
George were friends. They had played together and they had become they were friendly. They weren't exactly friends,
Friendly,
they were
yeah.
friendly, and they had played a championship. And then
Yeah, they
Jeff
could-
moved in, and they became buddies. And then Rick decided to kind of be buddies with Jeff, and they are just ruthless and mean and bullies.
I know, they're just nasty old boys.
But we know when they come in and they talk to or they come out in the schoolyard and they're talking to George and Kelly, and Rick makes a comment, you said if I told you everything that happened that you would leave him alone, so stop. I thought that was a big indicator that, maybe Rick's not so bad after all, and makes you think that maybe, at some point they could be at least be friendly again.
I thought that too. I was like, after this year, like maybe on in sixth grade, maybe if they met back up, that they would possibly be friends or at least be on friendlier terms than they are now.
It made me think about too, we all have groupings in our classrooms where if there's just this one student that you pluck them out of the population and put them over here, the whole class would organically get along in a way that they had never done before. But that one person can come in and switch and flip that dynamic in a way that nobody is included and nobody is accepted.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Jeff is he's that some jerk.
Yeah.
I guess maybe it would be too much to it would be steering from the plot, but it's like, ugh, why was nobody doing anything about him? Even the spitting. So I'm like, so no one saw him spitting or pretending to spit at George all week? Like,
right.
It seems like just one of those, shady boys that no matter how much they do it in public, they never get caught for it. Like they could push you down right in the middle of the playground and like, oh, we didn't see that. Like they just had that ability to always be cloaked in something,
So let's talk about George's family dynamic.
Yes.
The most accepting person of all
The
was Scott.
The
brother.
brother.
But he's like, so what? Because he has we'll see, what was it? It said he had one of his best friends was gay, and he was like,
Mhm.
so?
Yeah, so
And the problem here is what, Mom?
Literally.
I thought it was funny that the brother is a lot like Jeff and Rick. He's gross. Like he comes in, he's always having to go to the bathroom. He's always
He's all boy.
he's all boy. He is
all boy.
total
Little boy.
all boy, yes. But he does have like, and he thinks that the magazines are for something else, and he starts,
Yes.
kind of giving him, a hard time about that.
He thinks he's in
And
there looking at dirty magazines.
yeah, he's looking at dirty magazines, and he's like, "No, I'm looking at makeup tips."
Exactly.
Again, that was the accurate representation of an early, like he's probably 13, 14, if he's in ninth grade. Like
I thought maybe somewhere in middle school.
I know he was going, he just went to the ninth grade, I think. I think they say he just got to ninth grade.
Oh,
I think
okay.
so
I guess
too.
I missed that. I thought he was
Unless I'm
um,
making it up. I
maybe
think so.
not
I think
quite
it's
that old. But just him
so.
coming to like that defense and him just kind of being there, and you could tell that they had a good relationship. When she takes him out to eat, to get
Mhm.
pizza, he was like, "Oh Lord, we only go here when something's wrong. So what's happening?"
I love that they
And
were
then
like,
when he finds out, he's like, so?
Yeah, he's like, "Oh,
he literally said, weird, but it kind of makes sense. You don't make a very good boy.
yeah." And then
I'm
when
like-
George was like, "You're right, I don't."
He doesn't like the video games.
Mhm.
Like
At
it talks
all.
about like he'll play the Mario Kart, but then after a while he kind of gets bored with it. Like
And when
And then
when
the other
when
stuff, he's
Scott
like,
moves on to all those other games and those shooting games and balance games, he's like, peace out, done.
yeah,
Nope.
I'm
Or
done. I
George
don't
is
wanna
like,
do
nope,
this.
done, leaving.
Yep.
Oh, but even Mom connected some dots too when she was talking about when when George was younger, she pitched a fit and had a tantrum because her mother wouldn't buy her a tutu and let her take dance.
I did hate when the mom was like, it's not cute anymore. So it's
Oh,
kind of ironic though. That means like you entertained it when George was little.
For a little bit,
and now
yeah.
George is upset, you're trying to be, or George is older, you're trying to get upset. And it's like, well, Mom, maybe you should have tried to, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't have said it was cute in the first place if you were so against it. But I mean, not
Yeah.
that was going to change anything.
Right.
I think like the mom wasn't a villain or anything. She just needed time to adjust.
I think so too. I think she just
Yeah.
needed that minute of clarity where she could like, okay, this is really happening. This is not something that I had feared or something that might happen later on. Like, oh my goodness, this is it, and this is happening right now.
But as a mom, I think that, I mean, I feel like it was saying that, the mom is the caretaker. She's always busy. She's a
Working,
single
uh-huh.
mom. She's doing everything. And she does have to, I feel like she needs to process, and I kind of infer that that's what she just needed to process and just think, because it's like, wait, what? I can't go
Right, exactly. She's like,
here, and I
"Wait,
kind of am, but I need to stop
yes,
and pull
yes.
myself back a little bit.
Every conversation between the mom and George was always like a few days or something apart.
Mhm.
Like a situation would happen. She's like, we're not talking about this right now.
No.
And then she would just randomly be like, okay, so look, is it this? Like, are you gay? He's like, Mom, or she's like, Mom, I'm not gay. Like, I'm a girl.
I thought it was important that there was I didn't even write, I don't think I wrote down the quote where George talks about that she's not even sure what she likes and who she likes. All she knows is that she is a girl with boy parts.
Yes.
Basically, in a summary, just to summarize
Yeah.
that.
I know the mom kept saying one step at a time. And I did write down, and I'm kind of just jumping to the end and we can go backwards, but it was on pages 170, 171.
Mhm.
They were having a conversation, and George said, listen, like trying to be a boy is really hard.
Yeah.
And that's when her mom finally seemed to see her. She said one step at a time, and I said this is an adjustment for her as well. She also suggested that they go to therapy, and I was like, okay, like, so she's willing to make some steps as long as they're not rushing. Like, okay, we can talk about this some more. And then on page 177, when George was about to go to the zoo and everything, she decided not to give her mom too many details because she was like, remember, like Mom said, one step at a time.
Yeah.
George was even being considerate of the fact, like, this is big. Yes, it's big for me, but it's big for my mom too.
It's big for her too.
Oh, but you know, George had a hard time putting together Kelly's plan because there was a quote where Kelly had to tell her, "Don't you get it? We can
Right.
go as best girlfriends. We can dress up and everything." And so that's telling me that George wasn't following the plan. At first it was like, oh, like
Yeah.
this epiphany moment of
Because he was like, the zoo, that's for babies. And then he's like, oh,
Right.
wait a minute.
yes, it's stinky, it's smelly, it's
Yes,
gross.
smells like hay.
The
I
author,
did sort of think though too, and I know this is maybe inferring a little bit too much, but it seemed like Kelly thought that even if her uncle knew, that he wouldn't say anything about it, that he would sort of go along with the outing and just let them have fun and be who they were. Because, you know, I don't know how convincing George looks, but
right.
you know, it's going to be hard to kind of pull that trick off. But it did make me think that probably even if they couldn't pull it off, and even if the uncle knew right away after picking them up, that he wouldn't have cared. He just
Right.
would have taken them
For
to the
fourth grade
zoo.
boys, it's really not that difficult.
Okay, then.
Most fourth grade boys, just because they're all just, I mean, well, I'm gathering that George is lanky, like just long and thin.
Even if you look, well, I don't know if did y'all's book look like this?
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
mine's got
Okay.
that cover.
I didn't know if they all said Melissa or if some of them said George. But if you look at her in the little A, like, you can kind of get a little vision of like maybe what she would look like. Every time they kept describing her pulling her hair to the front,
Yeah,
Mhm.
brownish hair, I'm like, I can kind of see if they put a bow on, you know, because I have girls in my class that have like really short hair, so maybe with a bow or something and just dressed in a dress, like I can see it.
it might be easy to pull off. It did make me think though that I was like, you know, Kelly's pretty secure in the fact that it's a more about, again, she was really, you know, kind of putting that experience beyond you know, would they get caught with, because it wasn't really about them getting caught, it was just about George having an experience the way he wanted, and she was going to make that happen.
That was
I
so
felt
sweet
like
of her.
Well, and this quote set the tone for that. She looked in the mirror and gasped. Melissa gasped back at her. For a long time, she stood there just blinking. George smiled and Melissa smiled too. And I was like, oh wow, that was just when they were getting dressed in Kelly's room.
yeah,
I was like, oh, well, that was like kind of a, I mean, I don't know, just kind of, I felt like that was a clicking moment.
And when she finally just got to
For
sit
George, that
Melissa.
she finally felt like herself. And that just led you, but that was right before their outing. And so, but in their outing, it just was the prequel to how wonderful that she kept saying she felt on her outing.
yes. Yo, I wanted to say too that the fact that this book took place with the backdrop of Charlotte's Web, I just love that. I
Right?
think I wrote down that quote in my thing that George wanted to be Charlotte's Charlotte. Like he wanted to hold that ladder for Kelly. Like he wanted to do, like, they just have such a great friendship. But the fact that like that was kind of the whole beginning of the book, was that play was going on, and Charlotte's such a great inspiration to Wilbur, and then she has to go away. And so I just thought that was really touching that that was the play in the book that they decided to do.
Oh, but so who is Charlotte in the Kelly and George Melissa dynamic?
I think they flip back and forth. I think they're both each other's
But
Charlotte.
they are, but
Yeah.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but I just thought that was a really good aspect that she chose that particular book and play for them to be doing at the time.
I'm going to say the author did that on purpose.
I
For
think she
sure.
did.
And then even George's connection to Charlotte, like, because it was on such a deeper level.
It was, you know,
Like, I mean, he was willing to fight about it.
he was willing to fight about it and willing to, you know, it kind of like set the whole thing in motion when the play starts to when they do the auditions.
Um, let me see.
So back to the magazines, just a little real quick. If George were there, she would fit right in, giggling and linking her arms in theirs. She would wear a bright pink bikini, and she would have long hair that her new friends would love to braid. They would ask her name, and she would tell them, "My name is Melissa." And then just in that first chapter where she talks about that, those are her friends.
Mm-hmm.
Her best friends live in magazines, but that.
Yes.
And I feel like the progression from that book is that Melissa, because it goes from at the beginning of the book, she only goes by George mostly, and very few people know. But the progression of using the name Melissa by the end of the book increases tenfold. But also George goes from only having girlfriends in a magazine. Leaving out Kelly, but Kelly didn't know at the beginning of the book either that George was Melissa. The progression that followed that went from having friends in a magazine to having friends in real life. Because
Yes.
when they were standing after the play with the group of friends, I don't remember which one said, because it wasn't that their names, but a couple of the girls were truly genuinely interested in talking to George about it. And until one of the girls made a statement of no.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah, that it was, how could you do that? I could never do that. That there were a couple that were actually truly genuinely trying to be
They were
her
very
friend.
complimentary and being like,
Mhm.
I didn't even know, like, you sounded just like Charlotte and the way you were talking. And yeah,
That's
they
a
were
really good
very,
point. Because I didn't even think about the fact that George did kind of get to have that girlfriends, like plural girlfriends.
yeah,
It was very
friends.
short lived, but there was a little bit of a glimpse there that there was some
Right.
that going on. And that was right before Jeff and Rick walked up, and Rick was saying, "You said you would leave him alone if I told you what happened." And so I thought that was also, I don't know, I just felt like some of that set the stage that things are only going to get better for George or Melissa.
Yes.
But, let me see. Oh, I did write down from page 132, George felt like if her mom could see her play Charlotte, then she could see her as a girl. Um, just because we were talking about that connection that George had with Charlotte. Part of that was wanting her mom to see her like, okay, if she sees me as Charlotte, the girl, like she'll see me as a girl. Period.
As a
Yeah.
girl, yes. Yeah.
Another thing, I wrote quite a few quotes about everybody kind of being protective. Like on page 131, Kelly said, if you're going to be transgender and all, you're gonna have to be a lot more careful. Like you can't just throw up on everyone. And then I know in the diner scene, her brother said something like, "Oh," she was like, "You're not," or he was like, "You're not just gay, you're that type of gay," or something. And he said something about, having to be careful and understanding the mom's level of stress and things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
I
were
do
talking
remember
about
that
that
conversation.
not just being gay, but then when you're transgender brought a whole new level of
Mhm.
difficulty for them as a person.
And I
Yeah.
remember the brother said too that the dad told him when they got divorced, when his
Yeah.
parents got divorced, he said, look after George, he's gay. And so that's why I think the
Yeah.
brother was very understanding because the
Well,
dad had
but
kind of,
it quoted in the book that Scott finally that it said Scott his sibling made sense to him for the first time
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
after that.
To me, it was so ironic because I guess like nobody thought that George was a girl, but they all thought George was gay. And like
yes,
you said, even the dad was like, the brother said, "Oh, I know you're like that. Dad told me like, Dad been told me to look out
yeah,
for you before he even left." Like,
But
so
that's also that puts in that how society makes assumptions, and
all
you
right,
because I mean think about that too. There was this assumption that just because George was feminine or she was feminine that oh that means you're gay. Well, no, it means that inside George is a girl, and that he was or she was saying that she didn't even know what she liked as
yeah,
far
like
as that
that.
goes, that was the least of her worries, because she just didn't want to be a boy.
Yeah,
and it's kind of funny too because it's like it's almost like they're forgetting like they are. George is probably only 8, 9,
Fourth
maybe.
graders are typically 9, 10.
nine,
Mhm.
10.
So it's
Okay.
like they're Well, some of my fourth graders were worried about that, but like most of them weren't interested in the opposite sex. Like nobody
Uh,
was thinking about that.
my son's fourth grade class, they're all talking about boyfriend, girlfriend,
Oh
and
my
it was
gosh.
too much. And I was like, look, you're not old enough for that right now. You're not old enough to be worried about if you have a girlfriend. So we're just gonna drop that table that right now.
Oh, yeah, right. That's a good
And
way to
see,
look at it.
it's so funny because like this is really what the kids are talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Is it that kind of girlfriend, boyfriend where they're girlfriend and boyfriend through text? That's what always
And I was
kills
like,
me.
so when are you going to talk to each other? It's one of those things that it's just that it's for name only to say that, oh, I
Seriously.
have a girlfriend in that class or I have a boyfriend in that class. And I was going, you've told me that you like girls. You've told me who you think is pretty and who you have a crush on. It's done, it's tabled, and we're moving on. And if you need to talk about it anymore, that's fine. But you are not old enough, then we don't even need to go there right now.
Right. That's for way later.
That's so
You
funny.
have a long way to go in your life.
Yeah, before that.
I don't know if I already said this. Maybe I did. I don't know. Sorry if I did. But I did like how descriptive the author was with how George felt inside. So
Mhm.
I found the quote I wrote, support safe spaces for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender youth. And it says the word transgender sent a chill down George's spine. Um, and even that, like, okay, like, ooh, she got a chill. Like,
I
I
feel like
think,
you could read facial expressions and body language through just through the
right?
text. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed how descriptive she was in that sense because I'm like, okay, I can feel how George is feeling. Like, got a little
I
chill.
enjoyed how descriptive she was when talking about going to the room. I mean, that brought
Yeah.
me right back to elementary school. Just I could see it, smell it, feel it.
Mhm.
That was she was very descriptive in writing how it felt and kind of the mood. Like she really set the tone with the mood.
So the descriptions of the boys' bathroom, oh my
Oh,
gosh.
That's
yeah.
Oh my gosh, but it was so spot on. They're nasty, they're
Mhm.
disgusting.
and they smell
And
You
all
can
the
smell it
time.
walking past it.
Yeah.
oh yes, it's like you can smell. I mean, we had the biggest issue this year. That they had to send out emails that we couldn't let anybody go. We had to take whole classes at a time because the boys were peeing. Y'all, not just a little bit, but like just peeing in the floor.
Yeah. They like to kind of paint the wall with it.
Mm. Yeah.
I don't know, but
But
it
I
that
thought that was a very big description. But that also it kind of like that was one of the most hated places in school for George.
yeah.
She hated having to go to the bathroom. Wouldn't drink water. Didn't do anything to have to risk having to go to the bathroom. But then to
Right.
paint it like this horrible, nasty, desolate place was just. I felt like that just paired well in the
I
text.
I thought so too because it was a very accurate description of any boys or men's bathroom.
It really was. Even my personal children's bathroom at home, I'm like, go upstairs and clean it. Go upstairs and clean it. Get the Clorox wipe, get some spray, and go clean that mess.
Yeah.
Mhm.
One of the ladies that I used to work with, she had three boys, each in different schools, and she would say that they've been banned from using her bathroom, the master bathroom, because she said they don't know how to use it, so they're not allowed to use my bathroom ever. They can only use theirs.
Same, same.
I understand. I just found another quote that I wrote where somebody said sometimes transgender people don't get rights. I
Mhm.
think that was when George was talking to Kelly and she told Kelly about her mom taking her magazines. And Kelly was like, well, what gives her the right? She's like, sometimes transgender people don't get rights. And even that was also so big of such a young child. Like, I mean, she doesn't know. I don't know if she completely understands what that means, but she knows how she feels inside. And she's like, regardless of whatever, like, it is what it is. I'm still a girl.
I feel like you have George, who is a girl trapped in a boy's body, and you have Kelly, who is this miniature adult that is trapped in a little girl's body.
Oh, very yes,
100%.
definitely. But she's still so childlike. Like she's not too
Turning
mature that
cartwheels. But those are things that remind you that, hey, even though she is very wise and she's very pulled together, she is just a kid.
Exactly. She is just a kid and she enjoys life and enjoys being kind of who she is. She's not caught up in most of those things that kids are. But yeah, she is wise and she is, very understanding, but she is still a child and enjoys being a child.
But also too, she was talking about the boys not wearing skirts to school because the boys look up your dress and that's just gross
Right.
and horrible. But also when she and Melissa were getting dressed for the zoo and then she started turning cartwheels and Melissa talked about that her skirt was flying up and you could see her underpants. But I feel like having that connection and Melissa, George becoming Melissa to her gave her this, I can be a kid a little bit because I have a girlfriend.
Yeah.
Because I mean, she has friends at school, but George is obviously her best friend.
Yes, I think
Mhm.
George is obviously her best friend.
I think that was like a interesting moment that the author put in there because like she didn't have to add it, but it just showed like, okay, now they're both completely 100% comfortable. Nobody's being weird around the other. Like she's just doing a little cartwheel and she doesn't care. Like, you know.
Yeah.
On page 154, I wrote Kelly corrected herself when she said George was like a girl. Instead, she said she is a girl. And I
Oh.
think it's kind of funny too, even with our conversation, because I know we have all accidentally said he like 50 times on this Zoom. And
Yes.
Kelly, which I mean, it's an adjustment. But Kelly, she corrected herself the one time. And like after that, you are a girl. She is a girl, not like. And I was like, okay.
Yeah,
Like, that shows a lot about Kelly too, like
it does. It just shows even more that she's willing to kind of go that extra step and be very conscious of George's feelings and what
yeah,
George is experiencing, and she's really trying to make the experience a little bit easier.
because it's like, it's not even about being politically correct, she just genuinely cares about her friend,
Yeah,
and
she
she wants
genuinely cares about her friend.
yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
I agree.
Definitely.
Okay. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to add?
I'm
Uh,
trying to scroll back through my notes and
I
looking
know,
at
me too. I was just looking
like
at what
I did my notes on a piece of paper, like on in the drive, and
Mhm,
then I'm looking back through and then I wrote a whole bunch more.
mhm. That was I agree. That was my thing with adding my notes because I kept adding more. So it's
Yeah.
like and then it's so funny even with our conversation because it's not like we're speaking strictly from the notes. We're kind of just jumping all around. So it's like, making
Because
sure okay.
this comment sparks another another thought, and it's like, oh, but wait,
Which I
Right.
love it. I'm
add
like,
to the
okay.
book.
Yeah. I feel like
Oh,
hopefully
Sorry,
that's
Dr.
the
O.
intent,
We just enjoy the reading and we enjoy getting to have a book talk.
I know.
right?
I think that's what it is. Like, I just enjoy talking to you guys about,
We're
similar
not
stuff.
leading
And
it as the instruction. We're not doing
yeah,
doing it instructionally. We're just genuinely talking about what we saw in reading.
yeah. One of the things that I did write down that I thought was interesting was when the teacher wanted them to do the assignment, what color would you be?
All
And
right.
he said George wanted to be pink so that people would know she is a girl, but she hasn't written that down. Instead, she said she wanted to be purple like the sky and sunrise. I thought that was a really good thing. She chose a color that was although vivid and bright, she wanted to be that. But I liked how the author didn't say, well, she couldn't have what she wanted, so she just chose black, or she
Right.
chose, some kind of like color that's associated with, well, if I can't get what I want, I'll choose the color that, is least appealing to me. I
Which
like
shows
it's like, okay, well, if I can't have what I want, or if I can't, be totally honest, I'll pick the next best thing. I'll do color which is radiant and bright and beautiful and, everything else.
Right.
but did they mention sunrise? Because sunrises are symbolic of a new beginning.
Wow,
Yep. I
you
mean,
think outside of the box.
I know, like that butterfly, the caterpillar or whatever. Yeah, like that's like maybe that's just another way.
Yeah.
Like, hey, a sunrise is just a dawning of a new day for me.
And I know the author did describe a sunrise a couple of times in the book. Like on the way to Kelly's house before the zoo, I know she described the sunrise a little bit. So maybe that's why she
That
kept
might be a
Well,
reoccurring
but
theme.
you
Yeah,
started a book that had this character, and by the end of the book, the character is on their way to a new beginning.
right.
yeah,
Because
On
it definitely didn't start that you have a new beginning and you tell the progression. they're on their way and they're fighting George is fighting a struggle to get to the place of having a new beginning. And that is finally revealed with the excitement and when they go to the zoo and they have their fun and they have their girl day.
And that kind of ties in on page 195. Melissa had the best week of her life so far.
So far, I know, I saw that, I was like, I really
so
like
far.
that.
But that's indicative of too. That's the start of the new beginning.
Mhm.
New
Everybody
beginning.
knows it's out there, it's going, and I mean it's not. So I feel like you could take that and finish the story. If you could do like a finish the story writing prompt or something that
Oh,
your students
yeah.
could come together and
Like,
talk about how.
What can you infer?
Yeah, what can
Yeah.
you infer? What could you see happening positively? Do you think that George might have better days at school? Do you think now that it's understood that, you know, he and Kelly, they're besties and that things are going to get better? And you could just kind of see them maybe, anyway. Sorry.
I agree.
Yeah, no.
I overthink and I chase squirrels entirely too much. I do have guided notes when I'm in class doing instruction. Just
Oh, I wish I did more of that because sometimes I tend to get lost and I'm like, oh crap, where was I? I gotta find my way back to what I really needed to say.
but those left field moments are also very critical. But I mean, when we're delivering direct instruction, because you always end up on a tangent about vocabulary or comparing and contrasting something, or just something that is very important typically.
Or
This
even
is like
having a
my
deeper
philosophy.
conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I always say that you learn when you're not trying to. So like, as we're getting off in class on these little thoughts, maybe the student will connect that to the vocabulary and say, oh, I remember us talking about that word. That was when she mentioned that she had a bike and, you know, whatever.
Yes,
Honestly,
because when I say something out loud, all of a sudden it hits me and I'm going, oh.
mhm.
Some of
Yeah.
these things that we're talking about, as I hear you guys say them, I'm like, oh, I didn't even put the thought process there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's kind of funny. I remember last year there was a time, I don't know, I don't know if you guys had to do HMH. It was just a program that we used, but sorry. It was just a program and it had different readings and quizzes and blah blah blah. But one of the stories, they included the Beatles and nobody in my class knew who it was or knew who the Beatles were. And so on one of those tangents, I went off. I'm like, oh, like, listen, here's this song. And then I'm showing them artists who sampled them like today,
Yeah.
making connections. I'm like, okay, I know you listen to this artist here. They sampled them and they used this song, and here's the original song, and blah blah blah. And this is like months and months and months ago. But then in May, a random person had the Beatles on their shirt, and I'm like, hey, do you guys remember who that is? Like, and keep in mind, like, well, one of my students like, yeah, like, oh, I want to hold your hand. I'm like, oh, like, they
There you
learn
go.
from the tangents.
Right.
Just so you
Exactly.
know, that happens to all of us a lot.
Yes, I know I do.
And those
Same.
I'm like,
My
ah.
co-teacher and I are both that same personality, and so we can go off on something. But and by the end of the class, we've totally taught something from a different perspective than the lesson plan was initial, but it ended up yielding a much better result. And we're like,
Much
all right,
better.
let's just roll with it.
Exactly. You just have to roll with it.
I'm like, well, we're doing something right. They learn.
Yeah, exactly. We're doing
Yeah.
something right.
That's all that matters.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, I think that concludes our book talk for the week.
All right.
We can discuss our other things, you know, via text message.
Do the
Okay.
lead.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, sounds good. And we can just text and decide what day. I mean, Fridays have been working pretty fine.
Fridays are great. If y'all want to keep on
Yes.
that, that'll be great.
Do y'all want to do the same time even?
Yeah,
Yes,
same
that works for
time,
me.
same bat channel,
Yeah,
everything.
same bat time, same bat channel. We're good.
Yes.
All right,
Next Friday
sounds
at
good.
5:30.
All
All
right.
right. Y'all have a
Right.
great weekend. Thank you
You
so
too.
much.
Have a great weekend. Have a great evening. All right.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.